Hey, and welcome in. Today, I'm going to start this show with two quotes. Money destroys human roots wherever it is able to penetrate by turning desire for gain into the sole motive, and weak minds sink under prosperity as well as adversity. Conference realignment is a story of weak minds in the pursuit of money. Instead of figuring out a solution that makes everyone happy by creating a truly better product for and protecting student athletes, in non-revenue sports, the pursuit of more money has decimated the foundation of college sports. And we're going to talk about that today here on the Hoop Southbound Show.
Tonight, and the Kentucky coronation. And Angel Reese knows a ring is coming.
Three-pointer on the way, no good. Close with the dunk at the buzzer. It goes in Arkansas wins.
The Tennessee Volunteers are going to the Sweet 16. Florida takes its place in history. Back to back and unforgettable.
Calm down, John. Get him away. He's got it. Oh, he's out of here. What do I say?
For those of you who live under a rock or went camping in the national parks and didn't have internet access last week, in case you didn't hear, the college or the world of college sports imploded last week when Oregon and Washington announced they were headed to the Big Ten. The problem got worse when the Big 12 came by and finally put the Pac-12 out of its misery with Arizona, Arizona State, and Utah going to the Big 12. The Pac-12 is now on life support with Oregon State, Washington State, and Cal and Stanford bringing it flowers and asking itself what its future is. Hi, I'm David.
Hey guys, it's Maddie.
And this is the Hoop Southbound Show. And yes, today we are talking about conference realignment because it is the story that is absolutely dominating the college sports world right now. And it's nuts. Maddie, I've been reading articles and listening to some of the big names around college sports about what's going on. And I think everyone is legitimately upset. In fact, as a country, I don't think we've been this united on a topic since the beginning of the century, or since we all agreed that Elmo was right and Rocco's a jerk. I think those might be the closest that we've come together on agreeing on something. This sucks. I mean, flat out, it sucks. But what I hear from fans and the media is disagreements about where this is going and what we can actually do about it. Maddie, I'm going to start this conversation here today, and then we'll move on to the rest of the subject. When you heard the news that Oregon and Washington were going to the Big Ten, what was your initial reaction?
For me, being a mainly SEC follower when it comes to anything outside of basketball, I was a little confused. So after I started, doing a little bit more research, trying to figure out why in the world all of this disarray is happening in the world of college sports, money rules the world.
It does.
The Wu-Tang Clan did say cash rules everything around me. So, and that's obviously the case with Oregon and Washington. And it's one of those situations like, yeah, it's a quick fix for a buck, but in the long run, how is this going to affect everything else?
Yeah, I was met with sadness. We're talking about it. And like I said, I know this is an SEC show, and we're going to get into how this impacts the SEC. So hang tight, hang with us. We're going to get there eventually, listeners. I promise. But immediately I thought this is one of the oldest conferences in college sports. The Pac-12 is over 100 years old. You have great tradition, great rivalries, great foundation in the Pac-12 all around together. And poor leadership weak-minded individuals and just the pursuit of money have absolutely decimated what is one of the premier conferences, or what was one of the premier conferences in our sport that we cover in just college sports in general. They call it the Conference of Champions for a reason, and it's because of all the championships they have. It's devastating to lose this kind of tradition just to see a quick buck being kind of earned. And I was just baffled on some other things, because there's people being left out of this conversation, like student athletes and fans. And I definitely want to get into that just a little bit. So for the folks out there listening, you are smart people. You know what this is about, and what everything about conference realignment is. It's about money. And the highest revenues producing sports in college athletics is, of course, do I need to say it? It's football. It's the only sport getting its voice really heard right now. And here's why. Last season, the most regular season watch football game was at 17 million people watching Ohio State versus Michigan. The highest regular season game on ESPN for basketball last year was Duke versus North Carolina, which hit a 4-year high, I might add, in ratings. And it still was only at 2.8 million views. When you see those numbers, is there any wonder really, like, why, this whole conversation is being really centered around football?
No, not at all. Like, it's one of those glaringly obvious, like, they're the star player here. When you look at it, and unfortunately, it's one of those situations that the bench doesn't get an opinion.
No, it doesn't. And that's where we're at with it. It really is. I just want to go through this real fast because I've got a media background for those of you who've gotten to know me through the course of this. I did work in television under a little bitty studio umbrella. You may have heard of this company. It's called CBS. So, real small. But, I have a little bit of background in, how media works and kind of where these numbers at. And the conferences right now with the best media deals are the ones getting the revenue. And those conferences are the SEC and the Big Ten. These two conferences make up 60% of the top 100 media markets in their immediate footprint around the conference area before realignment, I might add. And now they've added, the Big Ten's added UCLA and USC to add the second largest media market in the country into that grouping as well. And so right now we're somewhere in between 66 to 70% of the top 100 media markets are being dominated by the SEC and the Big Ten at this point. So there's really no foothold for anybody left. The SEC got a bigger foothold when they took in Oklahoma, which includes another top 100 market in Oklahoma City, and they increased their output in Texas when they added the Texas Longhorns in there, who have 2 of the top 10, and then several, I'm not kidding, several top 100 media markets in that state. So there's a lot of people watching these two conferences, and that's what this is really about. So at this point, with the massive portions in these two conferences taking up and the awful media deals that were made by the Pac-12 under Scott, is it any wonder the power conferences are set up to, be consumed by two conferences, it seems like, and the other two are sitting there, the ACC and the Big 12 are really about to experience a lot of instability over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where, unfortunately, one person's bad decision a couple of years ago is now kind of ruining the Pac. Was it the Pac-4 right now?
Yeah, it's the Pac-4 now. It's gone. It's done. Everything's, done for there, in all honesty.
Yeah, I think my favorite meme I've seen so far out of this whole situation was a picture of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and it said the new Pac-4.
The new Pac-4, and they have Washington State, Oregon State, and Stanford and Cal all together there. Yeah, that's about right. Master Shredder, or Splinter is of course, the Pac-12 conference, or probably San Diego State, who was looking at possibly getting into the Pac-12. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. All right, Maddie, let's really get into the conversation now. Eli Drakowitz really made a great point, I thought. And that
Yeah.
is probably one of the few times you'll hear me say, no, I'm kidding. I thought he made a really great point when he was talking about student athletes in non-revenue sports. And, basketball is nowhere at the same revenue generating that college football is. And there's schools out there that basketball is not a revenue generating sports. And he asked pretty much the simple question, or pointed out the simple question: who's looking out for these student athletes who are now going to have to travel across the country to play a conference game, or for a conference swim meet, or any non-revenue generating sport? I mean, who's looking out for them? They got left completely out of this conversation. How do you really see like the future for student athletes, if the way things are set up now? Like, how do you think the world for a student athlete in Seattle, Washington, having to travel all the way out to New Jersey to play Rutgers and something, for women's soccer, what kind of future that makes now?
Yeah, it's one of those situations where yeah, sure, in the big scheme of things, when you're looking solely at football, yeah, it might make sense because they're traveling on maybe Friday, Saturday. They can plan their classes around it. They can plan, study time around it. But when you're, a baseball player that's going to play like 3 games back to back in a completely different time zone and then have to fly in, go to class the next day, or, like I think he mentioned, maybe like cross country athletes or, like you said, swimmers, just those smaller sports that aren't usually thought of, like thrown into the mix here. It's just, probably devastating for them when you think about it, because it adds a whole new level of stress, another possible imbalance when it comes to mental health, about being away from school, being away from, if they are close to family, being away from their family and their friends. And, like we both said, when it comes to study time, or, being able to get to class, or having to miss X, Y, and Z to make a meet or competition. Whereas, last year you may have had to miss a couple, but now it's like a whole bigger deal for sure.
It's a lot worse. Like, I can't fathom a world where anyone was looking out really for the student athletes in, these conferences in these areas. Nothing's geographic anymore. Like, thank God we're in the SEC, where, honestly, we're the only conference left that has any kind of portion of regional look to it. Of course, like, Missouri, Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, they're south, like, for the most part. Missouri, I'd use that term very loosely. But anything in those areas. But for the most part, like, it's south. It's where it's at. They're grouped together. I'm picking on Missouri a little bit there, but they belong in. We're all sitting here touching at least 2 to 3 states from each other. We're all here together in one group. Yes, it's a large conference, but at least we're regional at this point. And there was a vision there on some level to look out for those players across the conference to stay somewhat centrally located to one another. For the Big Ten, I can't say the same. For the Big 12, there's absolutely no continuity whatsoever to that conference. The ACC is kind of hanging out, like they're staying together, but those are the only two. Like, right now, we're waiting for the ACC to fracture, but I can't imagine being a kid who has expectations to go to class, who got a scholarship in a non-revenue generating sport, to go to class, play his game, and get an education for free being a student athlete. Now, you're, like you said, you're in a whole different world now, where we're dealing with these kids' educations, these kids' travel time, these kids' commitment to their teams. It's horrible, in all honesty. And this is what I'm kind of looking at right now, because there's going to be an impact on basketball as well, we'll get to in a second. But this should be part of the conversation. Should football just operate totally separately from the rest of the NCAA? Because right now, basketball, is a 300 plus team sport with several different rivalries and several different setups in a different situation. And that's the same across a lot of different sports, where they need to operate more regionally for the sake of their athletic departments. For where we're at, does football need to separate itself? Does football need to go under its own leadership as a college sport?
I mean, I feel like that's the way that we're heading. Very similar alignments to professional leagues at this point. when you're putting the emphasis on, especially when you're putting the emphasis on making money with them, because like you said, you look at those non-revenue generating sports, it's a whole different ball field. You have, like you said, these kids that are on scholarship, their NIL deals are going to be much, much different from the players. So it's going to be a whole different aspect. It's a totally different world for these student athletes versus the other. So I think in that perspective, it definitely should operate differently. And then as well as, going to look at how games are played, where they're played, when they're played versus the other sports.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on with this. All right. So the other side of this that I felt like really got left out of the loop was, fans. And the fans have lost a lot. They're losing out on traditions. They're losing out on rivalries. The enemies that you've kind of grown to love. They're losing out on that regional and community pride and all those things that make college sports great. No one was listening really to what the fans wanted. And honestly, if you looked at social media over the course of this, when I said everybody's pretty much united on this sucks. The fact of the matter is that, I don't know if the voice has been heard clear enough, but there was a pretty swift reaction to Oregon and Washington headed to the Big Ten. No one wanted this. No one wanted to see these traditions going away. And now there's talk now of the SEC bringing in North Carolina possibly, and Florida State's looking at leaving the ACC. Meanwhile, fans are missing out on these great rivalries and traditions they've grown so accustomed to with these conferences. Maddie, what's the future of the fan look like? Do you think that we'll see some backlash from fans in college football, or do you think it's going to be continue as business as usual?
I mean, I think we'll definitely see some backlash. That was my biggest thing, when looking kind of at the change of regionality that we talked about, is how are these rivalries going to be formed? It's going to be kind of how we feel with the battle line rivalry as Arkansas fans. It's forced. It's one of those things that, you can say it's a rivalry. You can say, it's a new tradition, all that you want. But if the fans don't like it, they're not going to get behind it.
Yeah, no, so Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I was just going to say, so I think there's going to be a big struggle with that. And then, these fans that have been used to their conference for so long, or that there's going to be a whole new lineup they're going to have to learn when it comes to teams, when it comes to, players and the way that those schools operate. And I feel like a lot of fans of these teams are just going to be like, you know what, never mind. I'll just pick up somewhere else.
I mean, or you can just watch the NFL on Sunday. If you want to see a lesser product of the NFL, that's what college football is trying to turn into right now, is a lesser product of the NFL. And that's not the best direction that I think many fans want it to go to. Sure, they would love to see the playoff expand. Sure, they would love to see a lot of things, but they want their regionality. They want rivalries. They want things like that. The only people who want this are, the presidents and board members who, see nothing but making money. I mean, a great example of someone just wanting to see money would be Oregon. They had a president on their board out there playing golf in the middle of the meeting that they were having about joining the Big Ten. Are you kidding me? We're talking about a huge decision for your school. And in the middle of this Zoom call meeting, you're out there trying to, hit a golf ball out of the sand pit that you knocked it into, trying to make par on this hole. And that's more important than the direction in which you're going to take your university for at least the next 5 to 7 years, and all the impact that it's going to have on all these other sports, all because the bottom line is more important. It's ludicrous. It's absolutely ludicrous on where this is headed. And needless to say, I think myself, and I think a lot of fans out there just have this disgusting taste in their mouth right now for how this is going. And while I'm kind of cynical at this given moment that people are just going to watch football anyway, they're going to continue moving on forward. It's going to be Saturday as usual. At the same time, I know there's plenty of fans out there who may just be, the same way when transfer portal came into existence. They were like, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Be clear, I'm not advocating against the transfer portal. I actually like the transfer portal. I like NIL. What I don't like is the fact of just uprooting tradition entirely. That's what I'm against. But there's going to be fans who, that same crowd who had issue with the transfer portal and NIL. There's going to be people who join that crowd because they're upset for the absolute decimation of tradition in college football and college sports in general. So it's a whole new world, and I think we'll see something from it. But now I'm kind of cynical, and I don't think it's going to be a huge number for how people are going to change.
Yeah, and I feel like when it comes to years down the line, it's going to change college sports on a whole different level, because now you're not just going to college to get an education. Like, you have multiple ways to get to, if they're your college athlete that's looking to get to the NFL or NBA, they have different avenues to do that now versus, traditionally it was you go to college, you play college ball, and then you go up. And now it's like, well, this is a joke. I'm just going to bypass this altogether.
No, I'm with you. And let's call it what it really is. Let's call it what it really is. What college football, or what these boards and presidents are turning college football into, is minor league NFL. That's what it's turning into. And it's sponsored by the University of Arkansas, or sponsored by the University of Alabama. It's not really the university. Like, that's the direction this thing is headed. It's getting there further and further every day. And it's getting absolutely ludicrous. And like I said, we've mentioned 100 times, this is a college basketball show. So the next thing we're going to talk about, how this impacts college basketball. These other sports are being left by the wayside and being hurt by a much larger sport right now. And that's where it's at. And that's a bummer talking about, because I do like football. And I'm sitting here like, man, we're having this conversation right at the beginning of football season on how mad we are at football right now. Like, it's crazy, right? Like, a lot of people should be gearing up to watch football right now. And, people like myself who love other sports, I'm just like, did you just want to flush the whole thing down the toilet? Was that your goal? Was that really what you were here for? Was to just destroy and make everything awful? Let's talk about the impact that it's going to have on college basketball before I start ranting, because I'm really, really upset about a lot of this stuff. I listened to Josh Pate last night, and he said, I cover college football. I'm upset right now. But if I covered a sport like basketball or college baseball right now, I would be furious. And I'm like, right here. I know I'm not big time, but I'm a huge fan, and like, I got my very small nothing show over here on YouTube, but man, I am livid right now. I can start saying bad words at any second.
Yeah, I mean, you look at it, we talked about it a little bit with the student athlete, where you're looking at different time zones, having to travel. As a fan or somebody that travels to cover that, being in a different time zone, having to travel across the entire country just to be able to report on a game, it's absolutely ridiculous. And then you're going to run into those networks that have it set up, but you're in a completely different region. So half the time they probably aren't going to be showing that you're wanting to watch.
The regional radio guy is used to doing his longest trip, from let's say here in the SEC, from Columbia to Gainesville, Florida, so to speak, or Columbia to Columbia, like, that's probably like one of the longest trips out there. But you only got to do that once a year. Now we're talking about, you got 4 teams on the West Coast in the Big Ten, for instance. And if you're the guy who does the radio for Rutgers or Maryland, and you're going to have to go cover college basketball on the radio, you're going to have 2 games a week, and you're going to be flying. That guy's life stinks now too, because radio guys don't get paid as much as you think they do. I know, because that was how I started the media, was in ESPN radio. So like, yeah, that probably sucks also.
Those frequent flyer miles, I guess.
Those frequent flyer miles, like, just going to have to rack those up. A lot of riding coach for a lot of radio stations, or you're going to broadcast from the TV on the feed is what we're going to give you today. Like, there's going to be some corners cut somewhere, and it'll make things not enjoyable for a lot of folks flying all over the country. All right, let's talk specifically college basketball. Like I said, we've seen this, and I mentioned it a little while ago. let's kind of come back here when we talked about Florida State after all this movement. They've already hired a financial firm to kind of take a look at the numbers and the situation there. And now there's rumor that they're talking about really making the ACC upset and trying to pull out of there. Of course, the ACC has its own blockade issues with its statement of rights and everything. And everybody's pretty much locked into the ACC into the 2030s. That doesn't mean that lawyering doesn't exist. So, as
you would know that.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm a law student. As a law professor, my contract professor said to me, it's not against the law to break a contract. So, that's do not take any of that as legal advice to anybody who's listening to this show. But as she said in class, it's not against the law to break a contract. You're going to have to pay something, but, you're going to sit there and you're going to bring that in and you're going to negotiate with the ACC over and over again until you get yourself out of there. And you're going to bury. If you want out hard enough, you can get out. And I think that's the direction Florida State and a lot of schools might be looking at. And Florida State might be the first domino in the ACC. And the SEC is currently sitting at 16 teams. I'm saying one of the number one schools that the SEC would want to go after is North Carolina. And they would want North Carolina because it's a huge media market. The Raleigh, Charlotte, and Fayetteville and those entire areas of North Carolina. There's a lot of top 100 media markets out there, a lot of population in North Carolina. It's a good brand. It's a decent football team. I think they would want North Carolina more than they would want Clemson. Clemson's just a football school, in all honesty. So North Carolina would be very attractive. You're also talking about bringing in one of the biggest basketball brands possibly out there, but that's going to be a very small, that's like the icing on the cake is how it's going to be on that. But if you pull North Carolina out of the ACC and the other team that you had one of the best media relationships. Matter of fact, we said earlier, the number one watched college basketball game last year, Duke versus North Carolina. If Duke's hanging out in nowhere land in a, say, ACC 4 in a couple of years, Duke's not coming to the SEC. Duke's not coming to the SEC. And it's because they don't have the football program to get there. But North Carolina totally could. And that's where we're kind of headed right now with conference realignment, is that we're going to start ripping apart a lot of these traditions if that becomes, something to be seen in the future.
Yeah. And I mean, you look at, like we talked about, regionality, you would have a solid rivalry in North Carolina against South Carolina, probably throw in Kentucky in there. That's close enough. And
it's blue blood. That's blue blood marketing is what that is. Yeah.
Like you said, it's a decent football program, but when it comes to basketball, it's legendary. I mean, you're going to have your ties to Michael Jordan. You're going to have your ties to a number of championships with or without Michael Jordan. And, like you said, blue blood marketing right there.
Yeah. And that's going to be a very small portion of this whole thing. But like, that's kind of going to go into my next point is like, we're going to rip apart these traditions. We're going to rip apart a lot of things. And then eventually, if college basketball is not separated from football in some way and the way that they operate, we could potentially talk about losing the March Madness at some point in the way it's currently formatted. That's the other side of this conversation, because we're talking somewhere down the line, someone's going to look at, hey, since we're all looking at this from a money perspective, let's keep looking at it from a money perspective. How many viewers are you getting for Alabama versus Louisiana Monroe? Let's not play those teams anymore. Let's make it better. Let's start cutting out the smaller teams. Let's not even deal with the greater 5 in football. And then eventually, if that rule's in place, like you're trying to cut everything back, basketball may end up in the same way where they're only playing power conference games in the non-conference schedule. And then we're talking about a much more condensed amongst the power schools league for a March Madness. Like we could, as the March Madness tournament as we know it, could be completely gone if the power schools decide to move away from the NCAA instead of letting football operate on its own. Like that's where I feel like we're headed. And I even see more issues coming up. So let's kind of talk about this a little more. What does the future hold? And is it apocalypse or are things going to change?
I mean, you bring up a good point with March Madness. My first thought is, honestly, just like sadness, because then we're not going to have the St. Peter's games. We're not going to have Furman. We're all of these Cinderella stories that make March Madness absolutely fantastic are all going to go to the wayside because, like you said, they aren't even going to have a chance to get there. So, I'm leaning a little towards apocalypse, but hopefully some commissioners will start pulling their heads out and make it a little bit better.
Well, that's kind of on us, right? And this is the other part of apocalypse that I want to talk about, like this worst case scenario in the future of how things look. This is what I just mentioned with someone saying, "Hey, we shouldn't play these little guys. Let's make it worse." Like you want to just try to hypothetically make this just a little bit worse, because I took these notes down and I'm willing to go through them because this is a scenario no one wants to go down. And that's the idea. Do what?
So let's go 0 dark 30. What you got?
Yeah.
David?
That's the idea of, hey, these schools that don't really draw huge numbers when it comes to football that are already in the conference. When do you start cutting them back and bringing in the ones who do? Or, just saying, hey, this way these teams play more often and you're guaranteed to have another high rated game every week instead of these teams who are maybe a little bit less on the rating side. Maddie, do you know who the 4 least watched teams are in the SEC according to their average numbers over the last several years prior to last season?
For football, you said?
For football, yeah.
I'm going to go Kentucky.
That's one.
Let's go South Carolina.
South Carolina's one.
Mississippi State.
It's not Mississippi State. It's not Mississippi State.
Missouri.
Missouri's one of them. The last one's so obvious.
So obvious.
So obvious. The least watched football program in the SEC. That's the one you're missing right now.
Least watched. Vandy.
It's Vandy. Those are your 4.
Let's say. So they're head scratcher, but it should have. It's so obvious that I forgot about them.
Yeah. So out of the SEC, the 4 least watched teams are, you're sitting here, you're looking at Kentucky, Missouri, South Carolina, and Vanderbilt. Those are the 4 least watched teams in the SEC. If you're a member of that fan base, I'm sorry, I'm not meaning to pick on you here. I'm using you hypothetically. But yeah, that's based on viewership numbers prior to the beginning of the 2022 football season. So I do have the numbers for average viewership also that we can bring in on this conversation over last year. So let's keep working on this just a little bit. I want you to pick 2 of these teams because their numbers are so bad and that you have a higher chance of getting more Alabama, Tennessee matchups or Georgia, Tennessee matchups. But like Vanderbilt, Georgia's not doing the numbers, or some of these teams aren't doing the numbers that you're looking for. Which 2 are you cutting out of the league, Maddie?
I mean, probably Vanderbilt and Kentucky. Mainly Kentucky for the sake of you're going to get more viewers for basketball season. So you'll just make your money up there from Kentucky.
So those are the 2 that you would cut?
Yep.
So let me try to help this pick a little bit. And this is just some more data that's out there. Out of the schools, when they don't play Alabama in football, Vanderbilt averages a drop of 100,000 viewers a game. Missouri drops 40,000 viewers. South Carolina drops 80,000 viewers, and Kentucky drops 120,000 viewers. And out of those programs, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, and Missouri didn't average 1 million viewers last year. And Vanderbilt is in a position where I could probably cover the primary media market with Tennessee. In fact, I'd argue that the 2 of them are possibly competitive on Saturdays for TV views. So my first cut would be Vanderbilt. That would be my first cut, which is really disgusting to say. And this is not something I'm actually saying we should do by any means, because I hate this. Yeah. Vanderbilt would be my first cut. And it's because their viewership doesn't help. If this is my primary concern is money, I'm talking about cutting out a charter member of the SEC for the sake of money. That may not happen in the SEC, but that may happen in, another conference down the road in the future. That could be a consideration. The other team I would be picking out is South Carolina. They have a smaller media market. I could probably cover a lot of it with Georgia the same way that I was talking about with Tennessee covering Vanderbilt. They don't deliver me an entire state's view anyway, because Clemson also is competitive in that market. And then we're talking for the reason you would want to keep Missouri and Kentucky is because Missouri, I feel like, well, this is fact. They have 2 top 100 media markets and actually top 50 media markets in Kansas City and St. Louis that they would have. And then also Springfield's in the top 100 as well. So they cover a very large portion of viewership and ratings potential, and they're a decent brand. So that would make me competitive in the Midwest, get some more Midwestern viewers. Missouri would probably be safe in that regard. And then the other side, the other team to keep would be Kentucky. I think Kentucky, the only reason Kentucky would be safe, so to speak, is that not only do they have the Louisville market, but they are competitive with Louisville in that market. But their basketball brand is honestly the only brand in the SEC that's probably going to be considered when they talk about basketball. And that's because you're talking about someone regularly contributing in the top 10 and most top watch games throughout the season. Last year, Kentucky, Tennessee was in the top 10 in viewership in college basketball last year. So that would be. I thought we were
at a football program.
Oh, no. I meant just viewership in general. Like, if you were to cut programs out, obviously for the other 15 teams in the SEC, basketball probably wouldn't be a consideration. And I'm saying that as someone who loves their basketball at a school that is very passionate about basketball, but the brand is not as strong as Kentucky's. Kentucky's is at a whole different planet than compared to everybody else in the conference. So I think Kentucky would be the only brand that would have a say. It's like, hey, we still recontribute it in basketball. They'd be probably the only brand that would be strong enough if I was just primarily concerned about money.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, that's kind of the grim reality that I'm thinking of, is that we could start cutting these programs out and they would be done away with, and it would be horrible, absolutely horrible to the tradition and life of the sport.
But I mean, when you get to that point, at what point do the, commissioners or whoever's going to be making these decisions continue to trim the fat, and how lean do they end up making it?
My horror show thought process is that we'll end up headed toward a two conference world, because like I said, you can't be competitive with more than 4 conferences at this size, or more than 3 conferences at this size currently. When you talk about the media markets, I think we would see probably conferences ranking somewhere from 24 teams to 24 team conferences in existence. And then they probably break them up into 4 divisions of 6 teams. And then they play each other through, this is football, back, because that would be the primary concern. They break them up into these smaller divisions. The division champions play in a playoff every year, and an 8-team playoff with the championship game between the 2 conference champions.
That sounds familiar.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? That you can see, it's gross to even think about this. I'm just saying, like I said, you're right. I've seen that brand before. I've seen this movie before. It's on TV every Sunday. Like, it's on TV.
And now what, like Monday and Thursday and
Thursday, Mondays, Sundays.
Game on Amazon Prime on a certain day too. Yeah.
That's where we're headed. And basketball is going to be cut out entirely of this conversation unless we do something about it. Unless we as fans do something about it. And this is what I'm going to say. I started this show on a quote. And I'm going to end it on a quote, because the thing that I think fans need to do is advocate for basketball. They need to treat basketball like, if we want to see change happen, we need to advocate for our sport. Like, we're passionate enough about it. It's not taboo to talk about basketball when you talk to friends about sports. Why should it be? If you watch basketball as committed as you were to, football, the numbers would be much higher. It would be a much widely considered sport. You would, even if you just raise the number of viewership a little bit, it would be more prominent in the conversation. And so I'm going to use a quote here from Lord Chesterfield. The best way to compel weak-minded people to adopt our opinion is to frighten them from all others by magnifying their danger. Now, I'm not advocating violence here, but what I'm saying is the danger in this scenario would be money. The danger would be if they start messing with basketball, some form of viewership retaliation. Stop watching. Or worse yet, make it so loud that you cannot be ignored. That's where I think that we as fans have something we can do, is because we're the consumer. They don't make money without us. Without turning on that TV, no one makes money. So that's if you want to advocate for basketball, make the viewership higher in basketball, find people, engage with them, grow the sport, make it loved, because it's getting better every year. There's a lot of talent out there. College basketball is fun. It's a fun sport. Share your love of it. And if you're listening to this podcast on August 8th, on Tuesday morning on August 8th, I'm guessing you're a pretty big basketball fan. I'm sure that you would love to have people that you can talk basketball with. So advocate for it, bring that idea around, because the only way you're going to scare these weak-minded, presidents and board members of these universities who are making every decision out financially is to make yourself loud enough to be heard. And so that's where I'm at. Advocate for the sport. All right, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the Arkansas brand and a bunch of these foreign tours when we come back.
Let's be honest, you're here because you love sports. We love sports too. And our friends over at Row One Brand love sports as much as we do. Row One Brand sells sports wall art, sports gift watches, and vintage apparel with ornamental designs created from real game ticket stubs and vintage sports memorabilia in their collection. If you want some vintage Golden State Warriors memorabilia, they have that too. It's a sports collector's dream website for anything sports related. Go over to row1brand.com to check out their great inventory. And when you use the promo code VSP15, you'll get 15% off any item on the whole site. That's code VSP15 for 15% off any item on the site. So click on the link below and go check them out. Row Run Brand, America's best vintage sports art, sports gifts.
Please go out, support our sponsors, just like these weak-minded presidents and members of certain universities that exist. We also like money, so we would love for you to, go out and support our sponsors. But in our case, it's not about making millions of dollars so I can float away on my yacht out to the middle of the Pacific Ocean while I sip on champagne. No, I would just like this money to spend on YouTube TV and kick back and enjoy college basketball throughout the course of the season. I'm sure Maddie would as well. So please go out and support our sponsors.
We don't ask for much over here.
If it's something you want, just check it out. That's all, just take a look. We give you a promo code, All right. So Maddie, a article came out. Mason Chiotti wrote this one. He talked about preseason exhibition with Purdue shows Arkansas basketball brand is strong. A big portion of this article was written in regard to the fact that Arkansas, this is the second year in a row, they've had a massive exhibition game against a huge opponent that they're, big brand name, big time opponent, power conference opponent in preseason, which is kind of unique because you don't see a lot of those in preseason time. And he's kind of advocating for the fact that Arkansas is become a pretty strong brand. Maddie, I just want to talk about this for a second, then we'll move on. Do you think Arkansas has gotten to a point where their brand has been restored closer to what it was in the 90s?
I definitely think so. I think not so much. Like I said in another video that our fans will see later on, it's almost like comparing a Jordan 1 and a Kobe 6. Like they're both legendary in their own respect, but completely different models, completely different mechanics behind it. I think, with Purdue, with Duke, with all of these games that we're seeing, it's on brand, I think, for Coach Musselman, in a different way than it was for Coach Richardson. Just because, he wants to show that we're a dominant force, not just in conference play and when it comes to March Madness. He wants everybody to, I think he doesn't want it to be known that he is a cupcake game coach.
Yeah, I think, reading this article also, just getting off the brand topic for a second, this article had a lot of stuff about like how last year's game against Texas down in Austin had a lot to contribute going throughout the course of the year on things to build on for Eric Musselman. So not only is this game great for the fans, it's great for the what you're trying to build around Arkansas to restore that, prestige level that it has. the issue, they're getting a lot of experience playing, a good team, a team that's going to be ranked somewhere in the top 10 when the first AP poll comes out. This is going to be a big time opponent Arkansas is going to play at home. And, you mentioned all those opponents Arkansas is playing, but the thing that makes this even more compelling is that Arkansas is playing good basketball right now. Yes, they finished 9th, 10th, in the SEC last year, tied for 9th, 10th by tiebreaker. But, however you want to say that, which way, overall, Arkansas has played very well, over the last several seasons. They finished top 4 a year ago in the SEC and went to the Elite 8. Same thing with a couple of years ago in 2021, 2022 season. That's just where we are. Or the 2020, 2021 season, what I meant to say with the, that was the Moses Moody year for Arkansas. But yeah, another top 3 finish in the SEC, came right back around, made an Elite 8 in March. That's repetitive Arkansas now. So, the only thing that's really different, it's at least on par with 70s Arkansas basketball at this point, which was also extremely high quality with trips to the Final Four and things like that. That's what's missing right now from the Eric Musselman era. People are remembering the Arkansas brand. It's coming back quite a bit. It wasn't forgotten here. It was still very much known in the viewership numbers, but the numbers were slightly down because under Mike Anderson and other coaches, it just hadn't been at the level that it was under Coach Richardson. And we're in a new era and things are going pretty darn good. I think fans are much more compelled and people are more interested. So it's making the brand much stronger.
Yeah. I mean, you see them consistently get better, which attracts more and more eyes, especially when you get to the level of playing in March and when you get these top recruits, because they're realizing that this program is headed in a fantastic direction, and that's going to get more eyes on them as well as, more eyes on the program in general. So, definitely heading towards a 90s style of Arkansas branding. But like you said, I think we are missing a Final Four, hopefully a national championship sometime soon as Arkansas fans over here. But, I think a few of those under Muss's belt and we could be up there considered a top tier program like Kentucky, like some of those other teams that we're playing this year.
I mean, obviously it's not blue blood status, but it is.
I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to sound like an Auburn fan. Okay. That's why I said top
say
tier.
That. This is an SEC podcast. I'll cut it there. We'll fix something there.
No, you put it in, David. Put it in.
All right, Maddie. I guess she wants smoke. That's what she's. If Gary Parrish could pick on Indiana once a week on the Ion College Basketball Podcast, I guess Maddie can throw that out there for Auburn fans. All right. We'll see if the internet works in Auburn, Alabama. All right, so let's just turn the page and stay on Arkansas, really. Let's turn to these foreign tours. Of course, we'll get to the men's side in just a second, but I really, really want to talk about what happened today in Europe with the Arkansas women's team. Mike Neighbors and company, the Lady Razorbacks, went out there and rolled. And when I say rolled, I mean beat the ever-loving tar out of in Croatia All-Stars. The final score, and yes, this is a real score in a basketball game. The final score was 124-12. I don't know much about in Croatia All-Stars, Maddie, but holy cow, how bad are you that you only put up 12 points?
We were finishing up a meeting today, and I got the text from David that said, "I'm not gonna overreact. I'm not gonna overreact." And I was like, "What in the world is this?" So finally, the picture loads, and I sat there and I looked at my boss and I said, "How bad are you when it comes to scoring, or how fantastic is our defense that this team put up 12 points?" He was like, "In the first quarter?" It's like, no, in the entire game.
They didn't score in the fourth quarter. They didn't score. Mind blown on how bad that was. My wife's reaction when I showed her the score was, "Yas, queen." Like, it was ridiculous just how ridiculous that score was. But of course, Arkansas will be back in action against a team that I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce when they head over to Greece. And then they will also play the University of Regina in Athens as well. So they'll have 2 games in Greece on this foreign tour coming up. Maddie, do you want to talk about the Georgia, or actually, let me go back. We still have one other tour that got kicked off yesterday, and that would be on Monday. And that would be LSU, and they are in the Bahamas. LSU beats Puerto Rico today, 86-82. After rallying in the fourth quarter, LSU has 2 more games in the Bahamas. LSU outscored Puerto Rico 12-2 to close out the game. They have 2 more games in the Bahamas, like I said, going over the next week or so. The next game is the 8th against the Bahamas, and the last game is the 10th against a team, as I said earlier, that I'm not going to attempt to pronounce because my Spanish is horrible, but they are from Argentina. I will give you that much. But LSU off to a decent start in the Bahamas out there in Atlantis. Maddie, do you want to go over a little bit of what happened with Georgia and Mississippi State over in Europe now that they're back stateside? We didn't really get a chance to talk about it too much, but they also distributed some butt kickings.
Yeah. Much like the railroad tracks by my house, they were just running straight through them. Pretty much everything that, I looked up to kind of give me a refresher. It was one of those thoughts kind of similar to what we talked about last season after the foreign tours was, are these teams that they're playing like good, or are we just going to see a powerhouse in the SEC in basketball? But I think, it's one of those, we're going to have to take it with a grain of salt and see what happens when we have players more so on their level than these teams we don't know anything about.
That's a fair point. I will say what happened for Mississippi State and Georgia, and clearly the Arkansas women's team. These teams that they're playing, a lot of them are not on the same level as what Kentucky played in Canada for the Global Jam. You remember when we did our Global Jam preview, I talked about a lot of those teams are very similar to under 23 teams that you'd see coming out of these countries being represented in a World Cup game. These teams are not quite that. These are a little bit further a step down. So I'm not surprised that there's some butt kicking going on around the world, if you will, right now, with SEC teams going over to Europe and dishing out plenty of punishment. That's just a reality what it is. But it's definitely fun to look up and seeing some of the scores in these games. Makes you feel good as a fan. But really what it's about more than anything else is how much better these teams are improving at basketball throughout the course of this year. All right, Maddie. Obviously, we had a long conversation about conference realignment. One that I was just mad about, I've been stewing about since Friday and just kind of upset. And I knew we needed to talk about it on the show. But I want to turn to a story that makes probably everybody feel a little bit better. There was an article that came out from A Sea of Blue, which is the SB Nation website for the Kentucky Wildcats. And I really liked this story. Aaron Bradshaw came out and, back in June in a basketball camp, he had a special meeting with a kid who was battling cerebral palsy. And he gave him an autograph and a tour signing benefits. And he did some nice things for this kid. And then here recently, Aaron Bradshaw gave one of his Global Jam shirts to a fan who was just like, man, I really would like this shirt. That would be great. Unfortunately, this shirt was exclusive to the Kentucky Wildcats team. And you can go read this article on A Sea of Blue, but it came out and Aaron Bradshaw went to the store, bought another shirt for him to wear, and then gave the fan an autographed version of this t-shirt. I was pretty blown away by this. And you can see the guy's name is Steven Herbacker, and he put this on his on Facebook, and he was pretty pumped about it. Obviously about this shirt, but he gave a lot of praise to Aaron Bradshaw. This is one of those stories that makes you feel a little bit better about the world that we live in at times. And I got to say, this is a really nice gesture from Aaron Bradshaw.
Yeah, for sure. Restores your faith in humanity a little bit, especially, I feel like once NIL kind of started taking more shape, you had a lot of fans worried about, well, all these players are just going to be in it for money now. It's going to be more geared like the NBA. You're going to have heartless people, or heartless, basically like teenagers making a bunch of money. But, like I said, restores your faith in humanity, gives these guys a better look at, the effect that they have on these fans of these schools.
Yeah, I want to read Steven's Facebook post he put here real quick. He said, when talking to Aaron, Reed, Jordan, and Grant, I mentioned how cool it was that Kentucky got to represent USA at Global Jam. I told them I searched everywhere for a shirt and couldn't find one. Aaron Bradshaw told me to hang out until after the signing, so I did. He then proceeded to buy a shirt from the Kroger we were at and gifted me his Team USA shirt and signed it. He told me that the fans are amazing and they mean a lot to him, and he knows how much this shirt would mean to me. And then he goes on with this great, compliment to John Calipari. John Calipari doesn't just recruit amazing players. He recruits amazing men. Why I like a group that isn't going to attack the coach or the players. He also goes on to give us a little bit of an update on Aaron Bradshaw's injury. Okay, credit Steven with his reporting, but he said he'll be out of the boot next week. We'll see what happens. He also says that Aaron Bradshaw is definitely 7-2. So I thought that was nice. He gave a nice little go big blue, but it's a cool shirt. I gotta say, there's a lot of love there. You gotta love it when players connect with fans. That's all I'm saying, because it just makes everything that much better.
Yeah, for sure. Because you not only reach that fan, and now guaranteed they're going to be a fan for life unless something insane happens. But all of those people that know that one specific person, they're going to gain fans, or somebody's going to hear the story down the line and make Aaron Bradshaw seem like that much better of a person, and possibly pick up some fans here or there. So it's one of those like gentle reminders that it actually matters, like what you do, and it's going to affect you in the long run for good or for bad. And I think this is a fantastic example of ways that he's benefiting the community around him.
Yep, that's how you become a local legend in a lot of ways too. It's giving back to the community that absolutely loves you. And I like this. Like I said, like this story a lot after a news cycle last week that was just pretty darn negative. This is nice that it came out last week. And I just thought we'd all enjoy that moment a little bit. All right. And also, Maddie, you got done recording your video the other day on Aaron Bradshaw for Freshman 15. You got a preview coming up for Aaron here pretty soon. I'm excited to see it when it comes out. And then, we'll have our whole Freshman 15 series starting to roll out on September 25th next month. So that'll be a lot of preview into the top 15 freshmen in the SEC. And I hope you guys really enjoy it. Also, I want to give a shout out to all you guys who have been subscribing lately and viewing a lot of our videos. This last week, we went over 10,000 views on the channel, and there's a lot of love there for us. Trust me, because, as Dolly Parton said, we'll keep doing this. As Dolly Parton pointed out, she'll keep writing songs as long as everybody keeps listening. Well, we'll keep doing this podcast as long as everybody keeps listening here. So we definitely love what you guys do. So please, as always, please like and subscribe to the show. We greatly appreciate it. And I hope we're doing the best that we can out here for y'all. And we're right there with you, and can't be more excited for basketball season. It really needs to get here because we are in desperate need of seeing something happening on a court right now.
Exactly. My dog started watching me try and play NBA 2K to get my basketball fix. So.
Okay. Yeah. That go Apollo. Is he picking up any skills on NBA 2K right now?
No, not at all. I mean, he figured out how to try and take the controller away from me. That's about it. He's like, nope, you're supposed to be petting me. Sorry about you. But he's still on play. He's still trying to play with the basketball every now and then, and he just runs away. So
I was playing 2K, I got the controller in my hand and sitting on my couch. This is way back in college, and Joey shoves his head in between, the space between the controller and my arms, and he just yanks the controller out of my hand, and I'm just like looking at him. He's like, "Hi, I wish to be petted." Like that's just such the dog move. Like,
Pay attention to me right now.
you just do it. You just need to pay attention to me. That's just the reality of this whole thing. Oh my goodness. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. As always, please like and subscribe. We will have a ton more content. Trust me, you're not going to regret the beginning of basketball season with everything that we got going on. We'll see you guys next week. Until next time, bye.
Thanks, guys. Have a good week.